Hi. So today I'm going to discuss an issue, one of the other socio-political issues, saving the rainforest. Now, recently, there have been people discussing how saving the rainforest was a big trend in the 90s, but like the early 90s with Fern Gully, but now a lot of people are realizing apparently that the rainforest isn't the biggest deal ecologically. Well, I think technically it is. Well, it might not be the biggest deal, but it is a serious big deal. And it was, as preachy as Ferngully might have been and as exaggerated some campaigns may have been, it was a really good thing to focus that much on saving the rainforest in the early 90s. For one thing, rainforests are the lungs of the earth, so are coral reefs and oceans, but rainforests are largely responsible for keeping the world's air healthy. So that's why, cutting down the rainforest would still be horrible and would spell, a lot of horrible stuff, possibly the end of the world, with the species currently on there because of what it would do to the ozone layer, which is already being depleted, in part because of rainforest destruction. So, I remember Rainforest Crunch in the early 90s. And I think they discontinued that candy due to there might have been some problems with hygiene issues with the suppliers. I don't know. I just heard that that was an issue with the Ben and Jerry's ice cream flavor. But I remember that and I miss it. It's one more nostalgic food with a more natural or organic slant. Of course, in my cookbook and recipes that I'm working on, I plan to do equivalent versions of that in different types of wild nuts and stuff. So, yeah. So also, yeah, um, I still think, even if it might have been exaggerated in some ways, it was really good that the early 90s had that trend to save the rainforest because it's really good that they came out with Fern Gully, and showed that cartoon to kids because that gave kids, an important message that they could take with them. You know, I heard this tragic report that so much wildlife habitat has been destroyed since the 90s, between the 90s and now. But imagine how much more could have potentially been destroyed if the 90s hadn't seen a surge in saving the rainforest in different movies and cartoons for kids and PSAs to save the rainforest, save endangered species, save the whales. There was this huge like in the 60s and 70s there was the ecology movement that started, and at first the right associated with just like long-haired smelly radical hippies, which sadly some people such as Trump supporters and Donald Trump still do, but a lot more people know. And so for a while, you had the counterculture of the 60s and the 70s promoting the ecology movement. And sadly, a lot of those people who used to fight for Mother Earth, then ended up swinging back to the establishment in the 80s. And the 80s had sort of a backlash where, it slanted more to the right and not as many people cared about the environment. But, in the 90s, when the 80s ended, that's when you started to have, like, Saving the Rainforest. Fern Gully came out in 1992, and there was suddenly this, even though Hillary is full of crap, as is Trump, I do have to say, I do have to give the Clinton administration of the 90s credit for the good things it did do. I still think Hillary Clinton has some possible good things she could do, even though that does not excuse her evil deeds. But, she and Bill, back when Bill became president in the beginning of the 90s, they did do a good thing by helping turn the U.S. in a more left-wing direction, for then at least. Same can't be said of now, but and then the Clinton administration in the 90s, early 90s, then mid 90s, was possibly, responsible for, shifting the whole socio-political spectrum of the media in the 90s back into ecological issues again. And, you had Fern Gully, you had Once Upon a Forest, you had Captain Planet and the Planeteers, and there were renewed, concerns about animals. It was suddenly, before the 90s, most people, most scientists didn't take it seriously that other animals had feelings, and they finally started to study that in the 90s, and now we know that's a proven fact. So, yeah, um, as much as I think it was Nostalgia Critic might have had this, thing about the saving the rainforest and how it was exaggerated in the early 90s, even if it was exaggerated, it is still important. And then another thing is that some people will bring up that the Amazon is not and other rainforests are not necessarily the paradise as shown in Fern Gully, that they have a lot of nasty bugs, nasty parasites, and diseases. Yes, however, there have been tribal cultures that have lived in the rainforest for countless centuries. And yes, I know there, as I've said before, there is no medicine that is as advanced as modern medicine is, and even that needs to advance further. However, the alternative medicine practiced by the Amazonian Indian tribes is really, really good for how old it is. As much there are, it is known that there are a lot of plants and substances in the rainforest, mostly like medicinal plants that could potentially cure cancer or even AIDS. There are a lot of important medicines in modern medicine originally came from rainforest plants. In fact, so while it may not be as good as it could be, um, a lot of like the medicine men, the shamans among of indigenous Amazonians have a really comprehensive and really good knowledge of medicine. So, even if the rainforest harbors nasty parasites, nasty viruses, nasty poisonous insects, the fact is that nature often tends to counterbalance hazardous things with things that can remedy that. Not perfectly, but it still can. So, you have in the rainforest a lot of medicinal plants to help cure those diseases that are also part of the rainforest ecosystem. Hey, they found quinine in the rainforest, which helps cure malaria, so it's like that. So, if you are careful about living in the rainforest, you can live a good, healthy life. And the rainforest still, in many ways, is a paradise. It still is a lush, beautiful ecosystem full of, really good foods that are healthy, full of important medicines and medicines that haven't even been discovered yet. And yes, full of very important biodiversity, the largest biodiversity of plants and animals in the world. And the trees of the rainforest ecosystem and their diversity are absolutely crucial to the health of the planet's ozone layer. No question about that. So, I love the movie Fern Gully. Yeah, it's not accurate, but it was really important that that movie came out and that lots of kids saw it, because who knows, if it hadn't come out, who knows how much more rainforest could have been lost between the 90s and now. And I think that's great. Save the rainforest, everyone. Go out, do research, to see what you can do to help save the rainforest and make sure that the rainforests are saved and that not any more rainforests are cut down.